At no point in your rambling, incoherent response were you even close to anything that could be considered a rational thought.
And of course, we're going to have rational thoughts today. I always say that because it's just funny. We're going to have them. But in case we do have some irrational thoughts, that'd be from me, not from our guest. Our guest today, however, does have some very rational and fascinating thoughts. She's the founder and CEO of Redfin Communications. She advises fintech, SaaS, AI, cybersecurity, industrial innovators, and turns complex stories into market-moving narratives and converts crises into competitive advantages. So before founding Redfin, in fact, she spent over 15 years heading global communications at IBM Research, JP Morgan Chase, including managing 9/11 in New York, SARS across Asia, M&A deals spanning 18 countries. You're not going to find a person more experienced in this kind of stuff than our guest today, Kathleen Lucente. Did I need to ask how to pronounce your last name? Lucente or how you pronounce it?
You got it, Lucente.
Lucente. Okay, beautiful. Man, before the show started, we talked briefly about crisis stuff, and you've got a very first-hand viewpoint of that, being there in New York, watching the second plane hit the tower, and boy, I can't imagine the visceral feelings of that happening, but it brought you into what it means to manage, adapt, crisis communication. So we're going to talk about that in a minute, but first, Kathleen, tell us how you got involved with this business. Communications? Corporate communications sounds kind of dry, but tell us how fun it is for you.
Well, it's really interesting. Actually, I started as a high-tech journalist in Boston, and I realized I was writing about engineering for EDN Products and Careers and Datamation and all these really kind of nerdy publications, and I had all these PR people coming in and pitching me. And I had some real terrible ones and some real great ones. I had some really interesting people who'd come in and babble on for whatever, and they'd hope I was going to write an article. I'm like, bye-bye now. And then the next person would come in. It would be fantastic. And I went in and talked to my boss, and I said, I think I'm going to jump to the dark side. What do you think? And he said, well, I did it and didn't work so well for me, but if you're going to do it, you better go over and talk to this Computer World editor who went to Cunningham Communication. And I met her, and we hit it off great. And it turned out Motorola in Austin, Texas, had actually called that agency and told them to hire me because I was writing about microprocessors, and I could write about it for engineers, but also for your grandmother or the Wall Street Journal. And so that's how I wound up in this. No degree in it. I was teaching freshman English at Boston College and a journalist. So there you go.
Going to the dark side. I did some second tier journalism stuff for some PR things. I always did newsjacking when I did. I'm like, okay, this is so basic for sales psychology.
Yeah.
And just for you folks, just so you know, newsjacking is taking a trending topic, writing about it, but then inserting your client into the bottom 2/3 or so to get them some boost on uplift from the trending news. And I had journalist friends and marketing friends, right? Mm-hmm. So my marketing friends called me a genius. My journalist friends called me a whore. So about the dark side, because the word pay to play comes into place, and it's
opportunistic. You got to be opportunistic sometimes. Right. You got to weigh that carefully. You got to weigh that carefully.
I saw the firm that sells forklifts and the ladders in France, the one that got stolen for the big heist.
Yeah,
did a reactive campaign yesterday, saying, "Hey, our ladders are good enough to steal," or something.
Wow. I mean, it's like the Gwyneth Paltrow thing, right? Like, here we go, right? You got to leverage it and figure out. And sometimes it's tasteful and sometimes it's not, but you got to know your audience.
I mean, it certainly worked for Wendy's. They had a really big push with that. What they did a few years ago? They increased several $1 billion because the communications gal was at home alone, and she texted something to somebody talking about, oh, your stuff is, it's not fresh, it's frozen. How did you get from the farm to here? And she said, oh gosh, you don't have refrigerators where you live. Smart ass response. People loved it. It blew up, and they tracked it. They said it increased the revenue by over $1 billion that year alone. So
I love that. that. Yeah, that's pretty cool.
Yeah. Okay, so let's talk about 9/11 for a minute, because that's even though it's been over 20 years, it's still deep in our culture now. And you were there.
Yeah.
Watching the second plane hit. Were you in crisis communications at that point, or that where you got into it at that point?
I kind of found myself in it, in the midst of it, right? So certainly I had worked on crisis issues previously. Like when I say crisis issues, that ranges, right? You've got natural disasters, you've got a product flaw. I've also been in situations where, like when I was working at Motorola, Intel had a product flaw, and we had to, obviously reporters were calling us and saying, hey, how are you going to, and we also had to balance that really careful and say, hey, we use a Six Sigma process, and, while it could happen to us, we feel pretty confident. So, you want to be classy in some of those situations, but when it's something like this, 9/11 or a natural disaster, since 9/11, and obviously living in Asia, I handled SARS, and I also handled PR around the tsunami and many different things that impacted, getting people out of dangerous places. And so I would say 9/11 was a wake up call for me in understanding what my capacity is as a communications professional. So I got to work early that day. I actually left in the morning. I had an office down on Wall Street and in Midtown. I was only married a year at that time, and I got to the train, and my cell phone rang, and it was my executive who I was supposed to meet with on Wall Street. And he said, hey, I finished my meeting, so you don't have to come down here, go to Midtown. So I missed it by a hair. I would have been literally at 60 Wall Street. Most of the people at Lab Morgan at 60 Wall Street, which is what I was in charge of, they were supposed to be up at Windows on the World that day to see Waters Magazine was doing an event up there, but the executives had already seen the keynote speaker, so they decided not to go. Otherwise, we would have had tons of people up on that and there. So there's just so many things. If you look at it, it was really crazy. But seeing this, the story that's interesting here is that when I did get to work, when you work in investment banking and banking, you get to work extremely early. If you don't have a job. It's just the way it is. And so I was there super early. My boss's office was the corner office, and I walked in. He's got TVs open all over the place because we're in media relations. And his partner called, and he lived down near the trade center. And his partner called and said, "I just saw a plane hit." And we were talking, going, "Well, what are you talking about? It was not on the news yet." Yeah. And then we're kind of talking, and all of a sudden it popped up on the news, and you could tell the news anchor seemed confused by what was going on, right? And then a few minutes later, a few more people arrived at the office, and we're all standing together in Joe's office, looking out the window past the MetLife building, and we see another plane hit. Like, you could see the smoke, you couldn't see the actual physical, but you could see something else had happened. And then it popped up on the news, and it literally was like an E.F. Hutton moment. Like, everyone kind of froze. And then people started going, I got to get out of here, because it felt like, are people coming out of the sky? Are we under attack? Are there going to be bombs? And,
what's next?
Literally, you just don't know.
Yeah. And
so it's a very interesting experience, but a lot of people left. They wanted to get out through the tunnel. They didn't want to get trapped in New York City. I stayed and handled communications. Phones were down. Like, my husband actually ran from Times Square to Midtown, broke past security, and got up to me wearing a suit covered in sweat. And he's like, "Oh my gosh, you're here. I wasn't sure if you were at Wall Street or not," because he had no way to reach me. Right. So I had agreed to go to Asia just only a few weeks before that. And so my boss had said, "Hey, there's two people there. One's a JP Morgan person, one's a Chase person. You can feel the tension. Everyone knows one person's going to get the job because of the merger had happened. He's, can you just go out and see what's going on?" Mm-hmm. So obviously that kind of got put on hold for a few weeks, and I stayed and worked on some really interesting things if you think about crisis comm today versus 20 years before that even. We started looking at the psychology of what's happening with our employees. People did not want to come back into the city. They maybe lived in Connecticut, New Jersey, Long Island. They thought, I have PTSD. I don't want to come back. Yep. And as a company, you have to be able to function. So you have to create, we didn't have the ability for everyone to take their Bloomberg terminals and go home, right? That's just not a reality. Right. Yeah. And fast forward, when SARS happened in Hong Kong, we were very close. We still had some of those problems, right? The equity floor couldn't say, "Hey, everyone just go home and work from home." Yeah. Right? Doesn't work that way. So very interesting challenges. When I got with SARS, we actually, when that happened, we actually took our executive bankers and we put them out in the region in different places immediately. Hey, you go to Singapore, you go here, you go there, so we can continue to execute on deals, because we knew from past experience that you have to put that into play.
Yeah, right. So you've got internal communications, external communications, and I was talking to a CDC gal. She did a crisis book with us, and I was very fascinated about the preparation for the next crisis. It sounds kind of negative, but we got to plan for something so you're not caught with nothing to say or do. But we don't know what it is always. There's like, hey, I'm going to have a crisis management handbook for these things, national disaster, local thing, whatever it would be, internal product stuff, and then the unknown, right? So how do you handle the preparation for both those scenarios where it's a typical thing or something you can't even think about?
Yeah, happy to talk about that. We do this for our clients. Something that I'm proud that we're able to do and really scale it for smaller businesses other than JP Morgan, right? Because I'm working with fintechs and, companies that are more in the, maybe at the top is like $1 billion, right? So that's kind of the size. We go in, I just did this with a healthcare client, went in and met with the CEO who's been in the healthcare industry for a long time. So she has that understanding. A lot of CEOs are like, oh, we'll just deal with that later. They don't actually put this in place. It's actually pretty shocking. And when you ask, if this happened, are you ready? Well, I guess so. You get these kind of, so they don't I call it putting an insurance policy in place, right? It's not that much money. Consider how much money you're gonna have to spend to clean up a mess later if you don't have it, right? So what I do with my team is we went in with this healthcare client. We interviewed the entire C-suite. We asked them, what are the things that keep you up at night, right? Breaches, natural disasters, because like here in Texas, Houston, the flooding caused lots of problems for companies when in the healthcare, where you couldn't get to an elderly person, right? Those types of things, or they couldn't get their medication. So all of these types of things where you have to think through all of the possibilities, right? And then we come back in and we actually build out a workshop with them, and we build out a total playbook with them, and then we actually do a reenactment of about 4 or 5 of those scenarios, and we with their tools. We're not trying to pull a fast one on them. We're saying, here's the tool book you have, and here are the things. Let's walk through it. And sometimes through that process, we realize, oh, there's another one that we didn't think about together, because it is a process together. It's not something you just like outsource and say, go figure this out. You want to see the executive team. I call it roll the tape. So play the tape forward, right? Like if this scenario happens, do we have the right lawyer? Do we have the right breach expert? Who's the outside counsel we have to bring in, right? So do we have all that in one place? So each of those scenarios we actually go through and we look at that. Now, that does not bulletproof you, right?
No, it's just.
But it gets you ready.
You can. I'm a pilot, a private pilot. So we practice engine out procedures at a higher altitude, because if it happens at low altitude, you're kind of screwed. High altitude, I just coast. But we practice it a lot so that when something does happen, it's muscle memory. Right. So I love the fact you guys actually walk through scenarios, kind of like those fake triage things, or actually practicing what if I was with a person doing security at a bank once, and they had a fake robbery happened, and I'm there documenting it for them. And even though everyone knew it was rehearsal, a fake, when the guy came in and yelled, everybody on the floor, I mean, it was, felt it. It felt real, even though we all knew it wasn't. It was really weird how it made that, because sometimes you plan things out, but if you don't practice it, you're deer in the headlights. Like, I don't know.
I did this with I've taught classes over at University of Texas, Austin, and I did a crisis scenario. I gave the students, I broke them out in their groups, and then I said, okay, here's the crisis. And I had fake reporters come in with cameras and put them on the spot. Who's your spokesperson? That kind of thing. And they really got to feel that, like, oh my gosh. But you pointed out, we do a pre-mortem and a post-mortem, right? The post-mortem on a crisis is so important, because you cannot improve that playbook or have honest conversations about what did we do well, how can we improve as a team, and you also have to keep it updated. You do a merger, you got 2 companies with 2 different things, right? It's probably the last thing someone's thinking about, right? But they really should get it. It kind of coalesces the executive team when you really kind of put this together and you say, hey guys, we're now together, we're in one boat.
Yep.
right? And, we're not throwing a life raft over to you because, we acquired you. We're now together.
Yeah, right. You share balance sheets, so you might
Exactly.
want to.
Let's figure this out, right?
I love that. So, but the bigger question I have is like, okay, so when it's something that's kind of thought of, whether it's an internal robbery or national disaster, okay, I can sketch that out, having some people on call, et cetera. But what about the things you can't predict? I mean, is there like a general template you guys can use for that?
Yeah, we actually, in that playbook, we have different holding statements, right? So what happens is, if something's weird is happening and you have to do your homework to figure out, but a reporter's calling or employees need to know how is management handling this.
Yep.
You need to be able to say we're looking into it and we take this very seriously. You've seen this in the press, right?
Yeah.
The question of how long you allow that time
That's right.
is also a problem.
Because I'm making stuff up here, but I'm going to sound confident.
Right. But you have to have a holding statement.
Yeah.
You have to have a holding statement. Obviously, you can't be prepared for everything. I mean, I've seen all sorts of crazy things. I remember this isn't a crisis as much, but when I was at IBM Research, we had just done the Garry Kasparov Big Blue chess match, right? So, world-renowned chess player playing against the Deep Blue, and this is old example, but I was in charge of IBM Research, and I got up there and I had all these reporters that were going to be coming up from all over the world, Japan, Germany. They were coming up in a bus. And I get up there and there's a huge rat blown up for protest. I don't know if you've ever seen, it's something that unions use. So it's a rat that is the size of the building, right?
Yeah.
And it's not a crisis, but if I have a bunch of Japanese reporters out there taking photos of it, it's going to be like they've never seen anything about this before. Now, I've seen this rat blown up in front of buildings down in New York City and places like that. But the first time you see something like that, you think, well, wait, who's the rat, and why is the rat here?
Yeah.
Turned out it was not a protest that regarding IBM at all. It was somebody was mad at the guy doing a driveway that was like off the side, but it was on our property. And I said, how fast do you need me to take a needle and like pop that sucker? How fast can we get that down? Because I am not having the reputation of our firm look like cuckoo heads when we have great news to tell.
It's not good B-roll.
No, and we have a slew of international reporters who are about to show up, and it's the last photo I ever want them to have to see.
Yeah.
Was not related, and we were able to get it down. I did not have to puncture the rat, but the good news is,
You were prepared to. I like that.
I was ready. Somebody told me the other day, I had someone say, Kathleen, if I'm ever in a street fight, I want you in my corner. So that's the ultimate, compliment.
I'll keep that in mind next time I'm down in Texas. I'll be calling Kathleen from my bike. Speaking of the unexpected weird things, this not really related to PR, but it's such a good story. I got to share it with you.
Go for it.
I was talking to a guy who he had a company that does sky typing, not sky writing with a stream. But he goes to a higher altitude where the winds are steady or something, and they do dot matrix typing. Right?
Wow.
So they're like, let's get married, love you, mom, whatever it was. And this person who hired this friend of mine said, I got this one really weird call once to do a sky typing at a golf tournament that really disrespected one of the other golfers.
Ooh.
Like, that's kind of rude and weird. I'm like, who was doing that? Oh, it was a bookie.
Of course.
Because it's like it's above the altitude where it wasn't blocked by the the TFR when there's golf, which you can't fly too close. So it's way high. And a bookie's like, if I can rattle this one guy, I've got my bets on him for a point shaving thing or whatever, made millions of dollars because it was not inexpensive to hire this guy to type this guy's thing. But it worked. He duffed on a couple of shots because he's looking.
Wow.
So
people will go to, that's an extreme example of what people will do to ruin reputation for money, right? That's a pretty, so that is like an interesting thing because I'm a big ethics person. So I interview clients very thoroughly to understand, are we, simpatico, right? Because I'm putting my name on you, right? And the company, my team is, and if we feel like you're going to be a shady person, I am not interested. Like that's the same thing with crisis comm. So crisis communications can be big money, right? Oil spills and things like that. I won't take that business because my other clients are going to say, wow, what's going on? So I do crisis comm for my clients only. I don't traditionally, I had somebody call one day and he wouldn't tell me who his lawyer was. He wouldn't, I'm like, yeah, we're not, you're not playing the game the way I will do it. And if you're not gonna, he just wanted me to go fix things. I do have a very interesting example for what you're talking about. One day I got a call from an investment banker, a young junior investment banker, and he said, we're trying to do a deal with a guy, and he owns all this sugar cane plantation. And we need him to get out of the way because we can't get the deal done. And I said, well, why are you calling me? And I'm like, I'm not a hitman. Like, what is going on? And he said, well, he asked us to go to our communications department, and because he's known as the butcher, because he's murdered many people in his country, and he wants you to get an article on the cover of Time magazine and like clear his name. I said,
on the cover of Time magazine, yes, murder.
I said, did you want me to call the chairman? And you think you're going to lose your job if we have this conversation any further? Like, it's not even okay that we're having this conversation. No, that's not happening. Find another way.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Do you guys do reputation management after the fact, or only preparing, preventing it? The crisis?
We do all the way through. I mean, we're looking at the entire enchilada there. I mean, because we're working with somebody who we're already vested in them. There's a lot of vulnerability there. We both have an interest in seeing things land jelly side up, and but I'm also very frank with. We had a company where I was doing work with. They had a huge protest with employees, and I dug into it with the CEO and founder, and I said, "You're right. I can turn this around. I can kill this story in the New York Times and not have you be in that. But here's what you have to change. There are some learnings that you have to handle here, because this is not going to go away. And there are some findings here that are concerning that you should do. They weren't something where I would feel bad representing the company, but there were some behaviors. So they hired a new chief people officer. There was a little bit of too much of a junior executive staff in place, and some up-leveling had to happen so they could go from, I call it going from club to corporate, right? Put your big boy pants on. Let's start acting like it, right?
Oh yeah, it's not always black and white. There's some gray stuff there that you've got to manage it with, know, but
Nobody's usually when there's a crisis, there's something there that you have to learn from. It's not, obviously natural disasters, that's not the thing, but if there's something where it's an HR thing, or, a breach even where you thought you had your house in order and you really, didn't understand, so maybe your cybersecurity situation wasn't where it needed to be.
Right.
And you were believing certain things, and that's always an issue. That's one of the biggest issues that companies are having today.
What's that? Believing that? What was that?
Breaches, where they get hijacked. Their customer list is being told, hey, we're going to release all this information. That's a big one right now.
Yeah,
that's a huge problem.
Stuff is weird. I've heard people actually paying it. Like, really?
Yeah. No, you have to have insurance. I mean, you could take an entire company down real fast if you don't actually take that seriously. Because most companies have really precious data, precious information, right? I mean, it's not, and so everything from major law firms to healthcare, obviously, banks, and you never know. I mean, I remember at one point I was working at an agency and we represented a credit card company that I will not disclose at the time. It was years ago, and somebody broke into their customer service area and stole something like 75 laptops. And so the big question was, do we tell the public and tell the customers that this happened, or do we know that they were really smart enough to get data, or were they just stealing the hardware? And of course, we had to say there's been this, and this is what we're doing. But we really had to help that credit card company understand. And today, there's a lot more familiarity with how companies handle that. But in the early days, it was a little bit like, do we hide under a desk and hope nobody, got some data? It's like, no, can't do that.
Yeah, no, now that I mean, with the internet and social media, there's nothing that's really private.
Right.
Everything's out there. You got to just nip it in the bud as best you can, I suppose.
Yeah, 100%.
What was the most challenging crisis communication that you had to work with somebody?
There's a sad one. I would say we were doing the corporate challenge in Singapore, which is a huge race, and we were very proud to be doing it. And we had at the end of the race, we were also excited to celebrate this. And I got pulled to the side and found out that a man had died in the arms of a 20-something-year-old. Interestingly, you've got the sovereign involved. You've got this young man it's traumatic. You've got the elderly fellow who has passed away. Yeah. So you have to sit down with all of that and then figure out, okay, how do we handle this?
Accidental. He didn't murder him.
Completely accidental. And this man had signed all the waivers and everything was signed. That doesn't change the fact that, his doctor knew he had a somewhat heart condition, and it's not a surprise that he chose to continue to be a runner. But the young man, helping him get through that process, helping the executive team, also how to communicate to the sponsors, worried about reputation. And, it was a lot, but I learned really fast that I was surrounded by really smart executives, but they were pretty flustered. And I was able to be that I turned into boss lady. I just, okay, everyone sit down. Here's what we're going to do. And everyone felt so much more relieved because we did everything appropriately and also culturally appropriately. Right. So understanding all those aspects. So that's just an interesting one. I think that for me had a lot of human element to it. And I think that was important to do it properly.
Very much so. Yeah. I think people appreciate that nowadays. I was talking to a guy just last month who's got a trash removal company. It's nice, high 7, low 8-figure company. Does pretty well, but he hires mainly people in recovery.
Yeah.
And he was like, you know what? We need to work on our branding and messaging. And I'm sort of reluctant to mention what we're doing. And he asked my opinion.
Yeah.
And I'd like to get your opinion on what I said. But I said, well, there's 2 ways to look at this. Number one, my first way is if someone's got a problem with that, maybe you don't want them as a customer, number one, because there's not a single soul on the planet that doesn't know somebody who's had a challenge with addiction, right? Yep. So if they have a problem with that, they're holier than thou, I don't want them as customers. That's angle number one. My other angle is if you do lean into it with pride and authority and confidence and showcase it. Say, 100 days sober. This is one of my best guys. I mean, if you actually celebrate it or say, we're making the world a better place. We're not picking people off the street. We're preventing them from going there.
Right.
So I'd like to get your opinion on that. When someone's got something that's like, do I put this in my brand or do I just keep it internal?
I think that's such a cool thing to celebrate. And I think putting the right structures around it. Right. So for example, there's a company that started here in Austin called Clean Cause. It's a drink. And the guy who started it was, and continues to struggle with addiction issues. But the money goes towards putting people in recovery, right? Yeah. So creating those synergies, right? Or there's probably in wherever his community is, some different groups that would really appreciate knowing that. Yeah. There's family members that worry about, hey, will this person ever get a job? And it's just so nice too. So it's more than the person in recovery. Addiction is a family disease, right? So really understanding that it touches really everybody. And I think that, I think it's cool if he leans into it. I can't imagine. I do understand what his concern would be. Sometimes you get people who are like, for example, affordable housing is a big hot topic in Austin, Texas.
Or, he's got people going into their home to pick out a couch. Maybe they don't want a drug addict in there or something. Well, he's, I don't know.
I think it depends, right? Like I know I just had somebody doing our people are judgmental on how they look at somebody, and not all addicts look a certain way, right? Gosh, no. I mean, right? It hits every economic level. This is not just a economic poor person's disease, no. And so I like that he's leaning into it, and he can certainly give he can give that as an option, like for people to say, hey, if there's, if you have concerns, please let me know. I want to make sure that you feel comfortable with our business.
Keep it open, Kyle. Yeah, you know what? I'll refer you. I'll give you the contact information. You can chat with him.
I would love to.
Maybe you could use some communication on that.
Yeah, of course.
Speaking of communication, folks, if you're interested in finding out more about what Kathleen does at Redfan, you can contact her by going to shameless plug time.
You can go to Kathleen Lucente on LinkedIn or our website, redfancommunications.com, and there's lots of goodies there to explore.
Terrific. Any parting words of wisdom for somebody who wants to make sure their communication is proper, clear, and preventing any fallout from, a bad word, any repercussions from a impending crisis?
Yeah, I would say absolutely make sure you have a crisis plan in place. If you don't have one, reach out to us. We're always happy to at least, talk to you and see if we can help you out with that. And then the other thing is make sure you have a brand narrative that hangs together and that you're walking the walk, because if you're just out there randomly, changing the words every day, you're not going to get the sticky factor you need. So keep up the good work.
Very good. Thank you very much. Kathleen Lucente from Redfan Communications. Her link and LinkedIn and website are below in the show notes. Check that out. Go ahead and like and subscribe and leave a comment and share the podcast if you feel like to. I do. And appreciate you having on today, Kathleen. Thank you very much and have a wonderful day.
You too, Doug. Thanks for having me.
You bet.